right, everybody, get your engines fired. It's time for Lights Out, Let's Chat.
Okay, quick question. What happens when teams come back from a 5-week break, bring a ton of upgrades, and then throw all of that onto one of the most chaotic tracks in Formula One? Well, you get Miami. And this weekend did not disappoint because we saw Ferrari coming out strong immediately, McLaren suddenly looking like the fastest team, Mercedes bounced back when it mattered most, and Red Bull, they still weren't fully dominating, but still looked super strong. And if you're new here to Formula One, don't you worry. I've got you. We're breaking all of this down right here. What happened in practice? Why sprint qualifying changed everything? What the sprint race told us? And how qualifying completely flipped the script again. Because this weekend was unpredictable. And honestly, that's exactly what we needed. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lights Out, Let's Chat. Let's get into it. Alright, let's get started at the beginning. Practice. Now, normally practice is just practice. Teams test things, drivers get comfortable. It's not always that exciting. But this practice session was different. Why? Because it was the first time we saw these cars after 5 weeks off. And that means upgrades. Like a lot of upgrades. If you're new, teams are constantly improving their cars. But big upgrades, those take time. So when you get a long break like this, that's when teams show up with major changes. So, who came out the fastest? Well, the Prince of Ferrari himself, Charles Leclerc. He set the pace with a 1:29.310. And right away, Ferrari looked strong. And that's important because when a team comes out fast immediately after a break, that usually means their upgrades worked. Now, of course, Max Verstappen finished P2 about 0.3 seconds off, which tells us Red Bull's still there, but not dominant. They also brought upgrades, especially a new rear wing concept. F1 teams really showed up like, yeah, we redesigned the entire car. No big deal. Now, of course, Oscar Piastri finished P3. And unfortunately, Lando Norris only placed P7, but his lap got messed up by traffic. So, their true pace, probably better than it looked. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Mercedes had issues. Kimi Antonelli, who's leading the championship, was P5, but he had engine problems. George Russell also had issues, which meant they missed important running time. And in Formula One, missing laps is a big deal because less data equals less understanding of the car. So, after all that, Ferrari looked strong, McLaren looked promising, Red Bull was close but not dominant, and Mercedes, well, they looked a little shaky. But here's the thing, practice doesn't decide anything. It just gives us clues. And those clues were about to get tested. Now we move into sprint qualifying. And if you're new, quick exclamation. This is a shorter qualifying session that sets the grid for the sprint race. Now, one of the biggest moments happened during sprint qualifying. Lando Norris absolutely nailed it, with the fastest time setting it at 1:27.869, which means he got sprint pole. And this was huge because it was McLaren's first pole of the season, and it broke Mercedes' early dominance. Now, Oscar Piastri also finished P3, so this wasn't just luck, this was real pace. McLaren really went, yeah, we were hiding all of this from every single person. Now, of course, Kimi Antonelli did place P2, just over 2/10 off. Even with earlier issues, he's still fighting. That's championship level consistency. Of course, Ferrari was close, but they weren't perfect. Leclerc was at P4, Hamilton P7, so they're competitive but messy. And in F1, small mistakes equals big consequences. Now, of course, Max Verstappen was only at P5, about half a second off. That's unusual for this driver. And this is the first real sign that Red Bull might not be the strongest team for the weekend. Of course, some big names were out early. That's the kind of thing that happens in short sessions. Of course, some big names were out early. Alonso, Perez, Bottas. That's the kind of thing that happens in short sessions. Timing, traffic, mistakes. It all matters. After sprint qualifying, McLaren looked like the fastest team. Mercedes still strong, Ferrari is close, but Red Bull slightly off. But we still had a race to run. Of course, we can't forget about the sprint race. Short race, no pit stops, pure pace. Lando Norris gets a clean start and controls the race. No mistakes, no panic, just control. That confirms something important. This wasn't just qualifying pace. McLaren is starting to get their groove back. Now, of course, Kimi Antonelli stayed close within range at times, but couldn't make the move. And this is where racecraft comes in. Being close isn't enough. You need the right movement. Now, of course, Piastri makes it a double podium, coming in at P3. He was clean, consistent. McLaren had one of the best balanced cars of the weekend. Now, Leclerc just off the podium. Hamilton moved up slightly, solid, but not threatening for the win. Of course, Max pushed, tried to move forward, but the car just didn't have that edge. Now, there was a lot of battles, turn 1, turn 11, close racing. Midfield drivers really just said, if we can't win, we'll at least entertain the fans. So here's what we learned. After the sprint race, McLaren, real deal. They're making a comeback. Mercedes, well, they're consistent. Ferrari is solid. Red Bull, not dominating enough. But then qualifying happens. And this is where everything changed. Again, Kimi Antonelli takes pole. He was the fastest time, having a 1:27.798. So, once again, he got pole position. That's 3 poles in a row. That's pretty much championship form. Of course, Max Verstappen comes back at P2. Huge improvement. Red Bull still trying to figure things out. And of course, Charles Leclerc came in at P3. Hamilton just outside the top 5. Same story. Close, but not quite there. Now, unfortunately, after winning the sprint, Lando Norris drops to P4. He just couldn't hook up the perfect lap. And that's Formula 1. You can't be perfect one session and then slightly off the next. Now, of course, the top 4 are within tenths of each other. That's pretty rare. It's definitely pretty competitive. So, momentum shifts. McLaren has sprint, Mercedes has qualifying. Upgrades working differently for each team. And of course, possible rain for the race. Now, what does it mean for the race coming up? So, Antonelli starts P1, clean air, control. Max Verstappen, P2, perfect position to attack. Norris, P4, dangerous with race pace. And Ferrari, well, needs strategy or chaos. Now, some of the key factors are tire wear, heat, strategy, and possible weather. And this is where things get unpredictable because Miami doesn't follow scripts. At this point, F1 is like, you thought you understood the order? Huh, that's cute. Alright, let's talk about the race. Because Miami definitely delivered chaos from the very first lap. And somehow, through all of that, one driver stayed completely in control. So, we have to start here. Kimi Antonelli wins from pole again. That's 3 wins in a row to start his Formula 1 career. Let me say that again. 3 in a row. Now, Winning one race early in your career is huge. Winning multiple is rare. Winning 3 straight, now that's championship level kind of stuff. And what makes it even more impressive is that this wasn't an easy race to control. He had pressure from Norris, strategy threats, safety cars, chaos all around him, and still he finishes about 3 seconds clear. Meanwhile, everyone else is out here spinning, crashing, getting penalties, and Antonelli's just like, yeah, I'll just win this race for you guys again. Don't worry. Now, let's talk about Lando Norris, because honestly, he did almost everything right. He had a strong pace, clear driving, even the fastest lap. But he lost the race because of strategy. This is super important. The undercut is when a driver pits earlier than the car ahead, gets fresh tires, goes faster immediately, and jumps them when they pit later. That's exactly what happened here. Antonelli's team nailed the timing. Norris, unfortunately, him and his team just missed out. So yeah, he did everything right, except the one thing that decides the race. But still, massive results for McLaren. Oscar Piastri brings it home in P3. And this wasn't just luck. He stayed clean, took advantage of mistakes ahead, and made a late push when it mattered. So McLaren isn't just improving anymore, they are starting to become a real contender. Of course, let's rewind, because this race got messy fast. Right off the start, Max Verstappen loses the rear and spins. At the start of a race, cars are packed together, tires aren't fully warmed up, grip is low, so one small mistake turns into a big moment. He goes from the front slightly into the middle. That's the F1 version of everything's fine. It's so fine. And then it absolutely wasn't. Now, of course, just 2 laps later, Isaac Hadjar and Pierre Gasly crashed. Midfield chaos, cars still bunched. Contact equals race ending damage. That is when the safety car comes out. Safety car means no racing, cars slow down, field bunches up. And this is huge, because now strategy gets involved early. Teams start thinking about pitting time. Once the race settled down, the errors started stacking up. Charles Leclerc is running near the front and clips the wall. That is right, Charles Leclerc clips the wall. Street-style tracks like Miami leave no room for mistakes. Even a small hit damages the car, costs pace, ends podium chances. Now, trying to recover, Charles Leclerc pushed too hard, cuts a corner, and gets a penalty. So now it's like, we hit the wall and then made it worse. Of course, Max Verstappen is still recovering. Goes for a move, looks up, runs wide, gains advantage, and then penalty. So, the big picture. 2 top drivers both making mistakes, both losing time, both out of the main fight. And then the last part of the race, survival mode. Trying to fight back, Charles Leclerc loses traction and does a full spin. He drops multiple places and couldn't recover. Now, of course, George Russell picks up on damage. Car loses pace, just trying to finish at this point. So, some of the final laps were worn tires, lockups, and near spins. At this point, it's not even about speed anymore. It's about who can just stay on the track. Now, here are your top 5 from the Miami Grand Prix. P1, Kimi Antonelli. P2, my personal favorite, Lando Norris. P3, Oscar Piastri. Super happy for a McLaren double podium. Of course, P4 was George Russell, and P5 was Max Verstappen. So, what did Miami actually tell us? Well, Antonelli is the real deal. He is not hyping. This is consistency. He's controlled. He is probably the next world champion. Next, McLaren is here, and it's about time they showed up. P2 and P3, real race pace, strong strategy, no longer the underdogs. Of course, mistakes decide everything. This race wasn't just about speed. It was lost on errors, won on consistency. Obviously, strategy matters more than ever. Undercuts, timing, decisions. That's what decided the win. Because Miami proved one thing: you don't just have to be fast, you have to survive. So, yeah, Miami has delivered. We've had momentum shifts, surprise pace, unexpected struggles, and a grid that's tighter than ever. And the biggest takeaway? Well, no clear favorite. Alright, now for question of the week. And this one is perfect after Miami. Are sprint races actually good for Formula One, or are they hurting the sport? Because if you watch this weekend, sprint qualifying changed the grid. The sprint race showed real pace, and then full qualifying flipped everything again. So it raises a real question. Does sprints add excitement or just make things more confusing? If you're newer to Formula One, a quick breakdown. A sprint weekend means less practice, short qualifying session, a short race, the sprint, and then the main race on Sunday. And the sprint race sets part of the tone for the weekend, gives points to the top finishers, and adds more racing overall. So instead of just one race, you get 2 chances for action. Let's get started with the positives, because honestly, sprint races do bring something exciting. Number 1, they bring more racing action. Instead of waiting all weekend for Sunday, you get a meaningful race on Saturday too. And for the fans, that's a win. Because let's be real, no one is complaining about more racing. Number 2, shakeups in the order. Sprints can mix up the grid, create unexpected results, giving underdogs a chance. We literally saw that in Miami. McLaren looked dominant in the sprint, then things changed again in qualifying. So it adds unpredictability. Number 3, real race pace in sight. Sprint races show something important. Not just one lap speed, but actual race pace. And that helps us understand who's fast over time, who struggles with tires, who can actually fight. But it's not all perfect, because sprint races also come with problems. One, it can get confusing, for newer fans especially. There are multiple qualifying sessions, different results matter in different ways, and the format isn't always simple. And Formula One already has a lot going on. 2, less time to prepare. With sprint weekends, teams get less practice time, which means less setup work, less data, more guessing. And that can hurt the quality of racing. 3, risk versus reward problem. This is a big one. Drivers have to think, do I push in the sprint or play it safe for Sunday? Because if you crash in sprint, your main race is ruined. So sometimes drivers don't take risk, and that can make sprints feel a little more cautious. It's like we want chaos, but also not that much chaos. So Miami was actually a perfect example of both sides. So the sprint gave us a McLaren pole, a Norris win, clear pace differences. But then qualifying changed everything. Race strategy decided the winner, and the sprint didn't fully predict Sunday. So what does this tell us? Sprint races add excitement, but don't always tell the full story. So, are sprint races good for Formula One? Honestly, they're good for entertainment, but still a lot of work in progress for the sport. They add action, create unpredictability, give fans more to watch, but they also add complexity, reduce preparation time, and sometimes can feel inconsistent. So, sprint races aren't ruining Formula One, but they're not perfect yet either. They're still evolving, and weekends like Miami show exactly why they're exciting and why they're debated. Because at the end of the day, sprint races gives us more chaos, and Formula One honestly thrives on that. But I want to hear from you. Do you like sprint races, or would you rather stick to the traditional format? Let me know, because this one fans are definitely split on. Alright, before we end the episode, let's get into F1 news of the week. Because right now, Formula One is changing fast. And not just on track. We're talking rules, engines, and even AI. That is right, you heard me right. Even AI. So, first up, the 2026 era is still being adjusted in real time. Drivers have been pretty vocal about issues like too much energy saving, confusing system like boost mode, and safety concerns from uneven speeds. Drivers are having to lift and coast more, meaning they're not pushing flat out. And while that works strategically, it's not exactly exciting to watch. So, what's happening now? The FIA is stepping in to reduce energy saving, making racing more aggressive, simplifying how these systems work. Bottom line, the new era isn't perfect yet, but instead of waiting, they're fixing as they go. Which is great, but also slightly terrifying. Okay, this next one is big. There is now a serious debate about the future of F1 engines. What's the issues? Well, drivers including Lando Norris have been criticizing the 2026 engines. Right now they're racing 50% electric, 50% combustion. And while that sounds advanced, some drivers think it's actually hurting racing. And you might be wondering, well, why? Well, more energy management, less consistent power delivery, more complexity overall, which can make racing feel less natural. So what's the solution to this? The FIA is now considering bringing back V8 engines by 2030 or 2031, reducing how much the cars rely on battery. This isn't just a small tweak. This could completely change Formula One again. We're talking sound, speed, and overall the feel of sport. Because let's be honest, F1 fans love loud engines. Now, this last piece of F1 news of the week is honestly kind of crazy. AI is becoming a huge part of Formula One. Teams are now using AI for race strategy, data analyzing, performance, and even fan experience and broadcast. Who's involved? Well, the big tech companies like Oracle and AWS are deeply connected with teams now. What does this mean? Well, Formula One is no longer just about drivers and cars. It's also about data technology and who can make the smartest decision fast. At this point, it's like, are we watching racing or a tech competition? Now, the big picture, the best teams aren't just the fastest anymore. They're the smartest. But yeah, this week in Formula One, a new era still being adjusted, a possible return to V8 engines, and AI becoming a major player in the sport. Because in Formula One, if the cars aren't evolving, the technology definitely is. Alright, everyone, that is the episode. If you enjoyed this, send it to someone who's trying to get into Formula One. We're making new fans over here. And also, let me know, how do we think the next race is going to be? Also, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Catch you later. And until next time, this is Lights Out, Let's Chat.
From Lights Out to the Checkered Flag, this has been Lights Out, Let's Chat podcast. We'll see you next time.